The smell of gunpowder and expensive cologne always reminds me of my father. It's a scent that lingers in the velvet curtains of our estate, a permanent ghost of the life he chose and the life he forced upon me. In the world of the Morty family, loyalty isn't a choice, it's the air you breathe. If you stop, you die. My father, Lorenzo Morty, ruled the Chicago waterfront with an iron fist and a silver tongue, but his ambition was a bottomless pit. And I, Sophia Morty, was his most valuable pawn. He didn't raise a daughter, he raised a weapon wrapped in silk and lace. Tonight, that weapon was aimed directly at the heart of the Romanos. I stood before the floor to ceiling mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the strap of a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. It was a deep, blood red silk, clinging to every curve, slit high enough to be dangerous. Beneath the garter on my right thigh sat a small, pearl handled blade. It wasn't for protection, it was for insurance. In our world, you never go into a lion's den without a way to bite back. My mission was simple. Infiltrate the Romano gala, find Dante Romano, the heir to the throne, and seductively extract the location of the shipment they'd hijacked from us last week. My father's voice echoed in my head. Men are weakest when they think they have conquered a beautiful woman, Sophia. Make him think he's won, and he'll give you the world. The drive to the Romano estate was a blur of neon lights and rain-slicked streets. Chicago looked beautiful from the back of a tinted limousine, a city of gold and shadows. But I knew what lay beneath the surface. I knew about the bodies buried in the concrete of the piers and the protection money squeezed from every storefront in Little Italy. As the car pulled up to the massive iron gates, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The Romanos were our blood rivals. 100-year war sat between our names, fueled by vendettas and graves. To them, I was a ghost, a myth. I'd been kept in the shadows, educated in Europe, hidden away until I was ready. Tonight was my debut, and the stakes were higher than my father knew. Walking into the ballroom was like stepping into a shark tank disguised as a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a fractured light over men in tuxedos and women in diamonds. Every smile was a lie. Every toast was a tactic. I moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, my eyes scanning for the target, and then I saw him. Dante Romano stood by the balcony, a glass of bourbon in his hand, surrounded by a circle of made men who looked like they were itching for an excuse to draw blood. He was taller than the photos suggested, with hair as dark as a raven's wing and eyes that seemed to cut through the smoke-filled room. He was the devil in a bespoke suit, and I was the girl sent to sell him a dream. The first time I saw blood, I was 7. It wasn't a scraped knee or a paper cut. It was the crimson puddle forming around my tutor's head after he was caught passing ledgers to the feds. My father hadn't ushered me out of the room. He had gripped my shoulder, his fingers digging into my collarbone, and forced me to watch. Look at it, Sophia, he had whispered, his voice cold as a winter morning. This is the price of betrayal. This is what happens when you put your own desires above the family. I didn't cry. I learned that day that tears were a waste of moisture. I learned that in our world, love was a liability and silence was the only true currency. That memory surged back as I caught Dante's gaze from across the ballroom. He didn't look away. Most men look at a woman like me with a mix of hunger and entitlement, but Dante's stare was different. It was calculating. It was the look of a predator identifying a new species of prey. I felt a shiver migrate down my spine, one that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles burn my throat, and began my approach. I had to be perfect. One slip, one stutter, and I wouldn't just fail my father. I would never leave this house alive. You look like a woman who's bored of the conversation, or perhaps just the company, I said, leaning against the marble pillar near him. My voice was a low, melodic purr, the result of years of coaching. I didn't look at him directly at first. I looked out at the rainy gardens. Dante didn't move, but I felt the energy around him shift. The men surrounding him went silent, their hands reflexively moving toward the buttons of their jackets. He dismissed them with a sharp flick of his wrist. Suddenly, the space around us felt incredibly small, as if the rest of the gala had faded into a gray blur. Boredom is a luxury I rarely afford, Kara, he replied. His voice was deep, a decadent baritone that vibrated in the air between us. But you're right about the company, it's predictable. You, on the other hand, are the only thing in this room I didn't see coming. I turned my head then, meeting his eyes fully. They were a piercing, stormy gray. Up close, the danger radiating off him was almost tactile, like the static before a lightning strike. Is that a compliment, Mr. Romano, or a warning? I asked, tilting my head just enough to expose the line of my throat. It was a classic move, an invitation. In this house, they're usually the same thing, he said, taking a step closer. He was close enough now that I could smell him sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and something sharper, something metallic. He didn't invade my space so much as he reclaimed it. I don't believe we've met. And I make it my business to know every beautiful face in this city. I've spent a long time away, living in the light, I lied effortlessly, but I found I missed the shadows of home. There's something honest about the dark, don't you think? Dante's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a beautiful, predatory expression. The dark doesn't hide secrets, it just gives them a place to grow. Tell me, what kind of secrets are you growing under that red silk, Sophia? My heart stopped. He knew my name. No, he couldn't. I was using an alias. I'd been introduced to the gatekeepers as Alina Vance, a socialite from New York. My name is Alina, I corrected him, my voice steady despite the roar of blood in my ears. And my secrets are far less interesting than the rumors about the Romano family. Alina, he repeated, the name sounding like a taunt on his tongue. He reached out, his fingers grazing the skin of my arm. The contact was electric, a searing heat that made my breath hitch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he trailed his hand down to my wrist, his thumb resting right over my pulse. He could feel it. He could feel my heart racing like a panicked engine. You're trembling, he whispered, stepping even closer until our chests were almost touching. Is it fear, or is it the thrill of being so close to the fire? The second time I saw blood, I was 17. It was my own. My brother Alberto had tried to help me run away with a boy from the neighborhood, a boy who fixed cars and had poetry in his eyes. We didn't even make it to the state line. My father's men found us at a diner in the middle of nowhere. They didn't kill the boy, they made me watch as they broke his hands, the hands that used to hold mine so gently. Then my father had slapped me across the face with his signet ring, cutting my cheek deep. You are a Morty, he'd screamed. Your heart belongs to this family until it stops beating. Do not ever try to give it away again. I carried that scar on the inside now. It was the reason I was here. It was the reason I couldn't let Dante Romano see through me. I forced myself to laugh, a soft, mocking sound. I've always liked the heat, Dante. It's the cold that kills you. He let go of my wrist, but the ghost of his touch remained, searing into my skin. Walk with me, he commanded. It wasn't a request. He led me toward the library, away from the prying eyes of the capo and the soldiers. The library was a cavernous room filled with leather-bound books and the scent of old paper. It felt like a sanctuary or a tomb. He closed the heavy oak doors behind us, the click of the lock echoing like a gunshot. You're very bold to come here, he said, walking behind a massive mahogany desk. He didn't sit. He turned to a crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Especially tonight, my father is in a foul mood. Someone has been sniffing around our docks, trying to find things that don't belong to them. This was it, the opening. I moved toward the desk, my eyes fixed on his. Maybe they're just looking for what was stolen from them, I suggested, my voice dropping an octave. I heard a rumor that a certain shipment of luxury goods went missing near the 4th Street Pier. A lot of people are unhappy about it. Dante handed me a glass, his eyes narrowing. Unlucky people, he said, the kind of people who don't realize that in Chicago, possession is 10/10 of the law. If it's on Romano land, it's Romano property. And what if it's not on your land yet? What if it's sitting in a warehouse waiting for a buyer who doesn't exist? I was pushing it, leaning into the danger. I placed my glass on the desk and leaned forward, letting the neckline of my dress do its work. I think you know exactly where it is, Dante, and I think you're looking for someone to help you move it before the Mortys find out. Dante laughed then, a genuine, dark sound that sent a fresh wave of chills through me. He moved around the desk with the speed of a viper, pinning me against the edge of the wood. His hands landed on either side of my hips, trapping me. You're good, he murmured, his face inches from mine. The way you play the part, the way you use your body like a silencer. Your father trained you well, Sophia. The room went cold. The air disappeared from my lungs. I froze, my hands hovering near his chest, my mind spinning. My alias, my cover, my years of preparation, all of it shattered in a single sentence. I looked into his eyes and saw not just knowledge, but a terrifying kind of amusement. You think I don't know who sent you? He asked, his voice a low, lethal silk. You think I don't know exactly whose blood runs through those veins? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My hand instinctively twitched toward the blade hidden on my thigh, but he was faster. He grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice, and pulled it away. Don't, he warned. I'd hate to ruin such a beautiful dress with such a predictable move. How I managed to whisper, my voice cracking. I've been watching you since you stepped off the plane from Rome, Sophia. I've watched you walk through the parks. I've watched you sit at your vanity through the scope of a rifle, and I've watched you prepare for this very night. He leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear, his breath hot against my skin. Your father thinks he's playing a game of chess. He doesn't realize I've already burned the board. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. Now, the question is, what am I going to do with a Morty princess in my private library while my men are outside waiting for the word to start a war? The tension in the room was no longer just about the mission. It was about the raw, violent attraction that had been simmering between us since the moment our eyes met. He hated me. He should kill me. I was the daughter of his greatest enemy, a spy sent to betray him. And yet, the way he held me, the way his eyes lingered on my lips, told a different story. If you were going to kill me, you would have done it at the door, I said, regaining a sliver of my defiance. You're talking to me because you want something or because you're bored, just like you said. Dante's grip on my wrist tightened, then softened, his thumb moving in a slow, agonizing circle against my skin. Maybe I want to see if the prize is worth the risk of the war, he said. Maybe I want to see if you're as loyal to your father as he thinks you are, or if there's a real woman under all that Morty ice. The third time I saw blood, it was a week ago. My father had summoned me to his study. He'd handed me a photograph of Dante Romano. Find his weakness, he'd ordered. He's young, he's arrogant, and he thinks he's untouchable. Use that. If you fail, Sophia, don't bother coming home. A daughter who cannot serve the family is no daughter at all. He'd said it while cleaning a smudge off his desk with a white silk handkerchief. a handkerchief that was stained with a single drop of red from a business meeting earlier that day. I looked at Dante now, the man I was supposed to destroy, and I realized I was the one who was trapped. My father will burn this city to the ground if I don't return tonight, I said, though it felt like a hollow threat. Let him, Dante replied, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. I've been looking for an excuse to see the skyline on fire. He moved his hand from my wrist to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. He pulled my head back, forcing me to look up at him. The power dynamic shifted, the air thick with an impossible, forbidden energy. I should have been fighting, I should have been screaming. But instead, I found myself leaning into him, my body betraying everything I had been taught. You're the enemy, I breathed, the words a dying gasp. I'm the only one in this world who sees you for what you really are, Sophia, he countered. Not a weapon, not a pawn, a woman who is tired of playing a part in a play written by old men. He leaned in, his lips a hair's breadth from mine. Tell me to stop, he challenged. Tell me you want to go back to that cage your father built for you, and I'll open the door. I'll even let you walk out. I looked at him, at the dark beauty and the lethal promise in his eyes. I thought of the blood on my father's hands, the broken hands of the boy I'd once loved, and the cold, empty life that awaited me. And then I did the most dangerous thing a Morty could ever do. I didn't tell him to stop. I reached up, my fingers curling into the lapels of his tuxedo, and pulled him down. When our lips met, it wasn't a kiss, it was a collision. It tasted like bourbon, desperation, and the beginning of a war. It was the feeling of 1,000 rules breaking at once, a chaotic symphony of forbidden desire. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me flush against his hard frame, and for a moment, the world outside, the families, the vendettas, the looming death ceased to exist. But as the kiss deepened, a sharp knock echoed on the library door. Dante, a voice called out. It was his father, the Don. The guests are asking for you. We have business to discuss. Our sources say the Mordis are making a move tonight. Dante broke the kiss, his eyes dark with a mix of frustration and something that looked dangerously like possession. He looked at the door, then back at me. He leaned in, his voice a low hiss. Stay here, don't make a sound. If my father finds you, not even I can save you. He smoothed his hair, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the door. Just before he opened it, he looked back at me, a shadow of a smile on his face. By the way, Sophia, he said, the shipment isn't in a warehouse. It's on a boat called the Siren, currently docked at Pier 19. Just in case you still wanted to be a good little spy. He stepped out, closing the door behind him, leaving me alone in the silence of the library, my heart thumping against my ribs and my soul caught between two fires. I stood there shivering, the taste of him still on my tongue. He'd given me the information. Why? Was it a trap or was it a test? I looked at the window. I could climb out, slip into the night, and give my father what he wanted. I could be the loyal daughter. I could secure our family's dominance. But as I looked at the heavy oak door Dante had just walked through, I realized the truth. The information didn't matter anymore. The shipment didn't matter. Because the moment Dante Romano kissed me, he didn't just find my weakness, he became it. I moved toward the window, the rain lashing against the glass. I had a choice to make, and both paths led to a graveyard. If I stayed, I was a traitor to my blood. If I left, I was a coward to my heart. Below, in the gardens, I saw the silhouettes of armed guards patrolling the perimeter. The Romano estate was a fortress, and I was a prisoner who had just fallen in love with her jailer. I reached for the latch of the window, my mind racing. I needed to think, I needed to plan, but most of all, I needed to know if the look in Dante's eyes was real or if he was just a better actor than I was. Suddenly, the library door creaked open again. It wasn't Dante. A tall, thin man with a scarred face stepped into the room. I recognized him instantly, Enzo, the Romano's most brutal cleaner. He looked at me, a cruel grin spreading across his face, and pulled a suppressed pistol from his shoulder holster. Dante is soft, Enzo whispered. He thinks you're a toy, but the Don knows a Morty when he smells one, and he doesn't like rats in his library. I reached for the blade on my thigh, but Enzo was already leveling the gun at my chest. Hands where I can see them, princess. You're coming with me. We have a lot to talk about before you die. The gala was still in full swing downstairs, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. No one would hear a thing. I was trapped in the heart of the enemy's territory, my cover blown, and the only man who could save me was the one who had every reason to want me dead. As Enzo stepped toward me, the reality of the underworld crashed down. There are no fairy tales in the Mafia. There is only the quick and the dead. And as I looked into the barrel of the gun, I wondered if this was the price for one moment of stolen heat in a life made of ice. Wait, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. If you kill me now, you'll never know what my father has planned for your docks at midnight. Enzo paused, his finger hovering over the trigger. Greed, the eternal flaw of the criminal. He wanted more than just my life, he wanted a promotion. Talk, he hissed. I took a deep breath, praying that Dante was as smart as he looked and that I was as dangerous as I hoped. The game had changed. It wasn't about seduction anymore, it was about survival. And in the dark heart of Chicago, those two things were often the same. The clock on the mantel ticked, each second a heartbeat closer to a war that would consume us all. I began to speak, weaving a thread of lies and truth, waiting for the moment to strike, while somewhere nearby, Dante Romano was deciding whether to be a son or a lover. The night was far from over, and the blood was only just beginning to spill. Enzo's pistol was a cold, absolute weight in the dim light of the library, the silencer attached to the barrel looking like a long, black finger pointing toward my inevitable end. He didn't care about the gala music outside or the hundreds of years of history between our families. He only cared about the promotion he would receive for personally executing a Morty princess. I could see the sweat on his upper lip, the twitch of greed in his eyes. Talk, he had hissed, and I knew I had exactly 3 seconds before his curiosity was outweighed by his bloodlust. My father didn't just send me for the shipment, Enzo, I said, my voice projecting a confidence I didn't feel. I stepped slightly to the left, away from the mahogany desk, trying to gauge the distance between us. He sent me as a distraction. At midnight, a crew of 12 is hitting your docks at Pier 4. They aren't looking for the shipment. They're looking to burn the warehouses and everyone inside them. If you're here with me, you're missing the chance to be the hero who stops the massacre. Enzo froze. His eyes flickered toward the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 11:20 p.m. I saw the gears turning behind his scarred face. If I was telling the truth and he caught the Morty hit squad, he'd be a capo by morning. If I was lying, he could still kill me in 20 minutes. You're lying, he snarled, but the gun sagged a fraction of an inch. Call your men, I challenged, taking another step. Check the perimeter of Pier 4, or kill me and explain to the Don why $3 million in infrastructure just went up in smoke while you were playing with a girl in a library. That was the opening. He reached for the radio at his belt with his left hand, his focus splitting for a heartbeat. I didn't hesitate. I reached beneath the hem of my red silk dress, my fingers finding the pearl handle of the blade. In one fluid motion, I lunged forward. I wasn't trying to kill him. Not yet. I drove the blade into the meat of his gun hand. He roared, the pistol clattering to the carpet. Before he could recover, the library door flew open with such force it hit the wall like a thunderclap. Dante Romano stood there, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. He didn't say a word, he moved like a shadow through a nightmare, landing a blow that sent Enzo sprawling across the floor, unconscious before he hit the marble. Dante looked at me, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with a mixture of fury and something that looked terrifyingly like relief. He looked at the knife in my hand, then at the blood on the carpet. I told you to stay put, he growled. I don't take orders from Romanos, I spat, though my knees were shaking. He was going to kill me, Dante. He stepped over Enzo's body, closing the distance between us until he could grip my shoulders. His touch was bruising, a desperate anchored hold. He shouldn't have been in here. My father sent him. They know, Sophia, they don't know everything, but they know a Morty is in the house. He lined down, his forehead resting against mine. The gala is a trap now for you and for me if I try to protect you. The drive away from the estate was a frantic descent into the belly of Chicago. Dante didn't use a limousine. He took a matte black motorcycle he had hidden near the servants' entrance. I clung to him, the red silk of my dress fluttering like a wounded wing in the wind as we tore through the rain-slicked streets. Every siren in the distance sounded like a death knell. We ended up in a safe house near the waterfront, a dilapidated brick building that looked like a warehouse but opened into a luxury loft filled with monitors and weapons. Dante slammed the door and locked it with 3 separate bolts. He turned to me, the adrenaline of the escape finally cooling into a cold, hard anger. You told Enzo about Pier 4, he said. It wasn't a question. I had to say something, I replied, shivering in the sudden stillness. He was going to pull the trigger. My father has men at Pier 4 now because of your distraction. If your father's men actually show up there, it's a bloodbath. If they don't, my father will know I let you go because he'll find Enzo's radio logs. Dante walked over to a glass cases of handguns, his back to me. You've started the war, Sophia, not your father, not mine. I walked up behind him, the heat radiating off his body, calling to me despite the danger. I did what I had to do to survive. Isn't that the first rule of the Omerta? Survival above all. He spun around, grabbing my waist and lifting me until I was pressed against the cold glass of the gun case. The first rule is loyalty, and you just betrayed yours, and I'm betraying mine every second you're in this room. He stared at me, his stormy eyes searching mine for a lie, for a reason to hate me. Why did you come here tonight, genuinely? Was it just the shipment, or was it because you wanted to see if the rumors about the Romano beast were true? I felt the cold glass against my back and the scorching heat of him against my front. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and the looming threat of the world outside. I came because I was a pawn, I whispered, my hand moving up to trace the line of his jaw. But I stayed because for the first time in 24 years, I felt like someone was actually looking at me. Not at a Morty princess, not at a weapon, just at me. His expression softened for a fraction of a second, a moment of pure, unadulterated vulnerability that shouldn't exist in a man like him. He lined in, his lips inches from mine. You think I don't know who sent you? He murmured, repeating the words from the gala, but this time they weren't a threat, they were a confession. I knew the moment you walked in. I saw your father's signature in the way you tilted your head. I saw the Morty ice in your eyes. He groaned, a low, guttural sound, and crushed his mouth against mine. This wasn't the tentative kiss from the library. This was a claim. It was the sound of 2 drowning people finding one lungful of air between them. We were enemies by blood, rivals by territory, but in this darkened safe house, we were just 2 broken things trying to fit together. We spent the next hour in a state of hypervigilance, the intimacy of the kiss replaced by the cold reality of our situation. Dante was on the encrypted lines, listening to the chatter from both families. The news was bad. Your father is calling a sit down, Dante said, his eyes fixed on a glowing monitor. But not with my father, with the Lucchese family. He's trying to cut the Romanos out of the Northern Territory entirely. He's using my disappearance as a pretext, I realized, the cold sinking into my bones. He'll claim you kidnapped me. He'll use the outrage to justify breaking the truce that has held for 10 years. He's smarter than I thought, Dante muttered. He turned to me, his face grim. If they find you here, Sophia, the Lucases will side with your father. They'll see the Romanos as the aggressors. They'll wipe us out. Then I have to go back, I said, though the thought felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I have to show up at home and tell him I escaped on my own. I have to tell him I have the location of the shipment. Dante stood up, walking toward me with a slow, deliberate pace. And what will you tell him about me? When he asks if you seduced the heir to the Romano throne, what will you say? I looked at him, at the man who had risked everything to pull me out of that library. I'll tell him I found your weakness, I said softly. And what is it? Me, I replied. Dante didn't smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. This contains the true ledgers for the shipment on the Siren. It also has the names of the 3 men in your father's inner circle who are on our payroll. I gasped, reaching for the drive, but he held it just out of reach. Why are you giving me this? This could destroy your leverage because I need you to be more than a princess, Sophia. I need you to be the queen. If you're going back into that house, you need to be the one holding the gun, not just the target. He pressed the drive into my palm and closed my fingers over it. Use this to negotiate your way to the top. When your father steps down or when he's moved aside, we stop the war. You're asking me to betray my father, I whispered. I'm asking you to save yourself. Because as long as he's in charge, you'll always be a pawn, and I don't want a pawn, I want you. The weight of the drive felt like a mountain in my hand. He was giving me the keys to the kingdom, but they were soaked in the potential blood of my own kin. This was the moment the title of my life changed. It wasn't about seducing him anymore. It was about whether I was willing to burn my own house down to build a new one with him. The flash drive was a heavy secret in the pocket of my ruined dress as Dante snuck me back toward the Italian border of the city. He couldn't take me all the way. The Morty patrols were already out in force. Stopping cars and checking IDs, he dropped me 2 blocks from my father's secondary estate, a fortress like villa disguised as a historic landmark. If I don't hear from you by dawn, Dante said, his voice barely audible over the idling engine of the bike, I'm coming in with or without an army. Don't, I pleaded, grabbing his hand. Dante, if you show up there, it's suicide. Then don't make me come in, he said, and for a second, the hard mask of the Romano air cracked, revealing the terrified man beneath. He kissed my hand, his lips lingering on my knuckles, and then he was gone, a ghost in the Chicago rain. I walked the remaining 2 blocks, my heart a drum in my ears. I tore the silk of my dress further, mussed my hair, and rubbed some of the dirt from the alleyway onto my skin. I needed to look like a woman who had fought her way out of hell. When I reached the gates, the guards immediately leveled their rifles at me. It's me, Sophia, I screamed. The gates groaned open. I was swarmed by men, ushered into the house with a frantic, violent energy. My father was in the dining room, a bottle of expensive Barolo open on the table, several of his capos standing around him like vultures. He looked up as I entered, his eyes cold and unreadable. Sophia, he said, his voice a low vibration. You're late. We were just discussing your funeral. I have the location, I gasped, collapsing into a chair. The Romanos, they tried to kill me. Dante Romano took me to a library. He was going to, but I got away. I found the ledgers, Papa. My father stood up, walking toward me with a slow, predatory stride. He didn't offer a hug or a word of comfort. He reached out and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. You got away from Dante Romano, the man who has never let a secret leave his sight alive. He's arrogant, I lied, the words tasting like copper. He thought I was just a girl. He left me with Enzo, and I handled it. My father looked at the cut on my cheek, the bruise on my arm. He looked into my eyes, searching for the crack in the ice. And the information, I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and set it on the table. Everything, the boat is the siren, Pier 19, but more importantly, Papa, we have traitors. The room went deathly silent. The capos shifted uncomfortably. My father picked up the drive, rolling it between his fingers. He looked at it like it was a holy relic. If this is true, Sophia, you have done more tonight than your brothers have done in 10 years. He lined down, his face inches from mine. But if you're lying to me, if you've brought a Trojan horse into my house, I will personally ensure you never see another sunrise. The next 3 hours were a blur of calculated violence and digital revelations. My father's tech experts confirmed the data on the drive. By 3 a.m., two of the capos standing in the room had been dragged out to the sound of muffled pleas. I sat in my room, listening to the screams from the basement, feeling like a monster. Dante had given me the tools to purge my father's house, and I was using them. I knew I was being watched. My father didn't trust the daughter who had returned from the dead so easily. Every time I moved, I saw a shadow in the hallway. I managed to slip into my father's study while he was overseeing a liquidation in the garage. I needed to find his plans for the morning. If Dante was right, the sit down with the Lucases was a decoy. I found the map on his desk. It wasn't Pier 19. He was sending a decoy team to the Siren, but the real force was heading for the Romano headquarters, the social club where Dante's father spent his nights. It was a decapitation strike. My father wasn't interested in the shipment anymore. He was going to end the Romanos tonight. My breath hitched. I had to warn Dante. But how? My phone had been taken for security, and every exit was guarded. I looked out the window. It was a 40-foot drop into the rose garden. I remembered the library, the way Dante had held me, the way he had looked at me as if I were the only thing that mattered in a world of blood. I couldn't let him die. Even if it meant I never got to see him again, even if it meant I was the one who pulled the trigger on my own family's legacy. I moved toward the balcony, but as I reached for the handle, the door behind me creaked open. Going somewhere, Sophia? It was Alberto, my brother. He was leaning against the door frame, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. He looked at the map on the desk, then at me. You always were the favorite, he said, his voice dripping with bitterness. The one who went to Europe, the one who got to keep her soul while Papa took mine piece by piece. Alberto, please, I said, stepping toward him. You know what Papa is doing? He's starting a war that will kill all of us. He's starting a war he thinks he can win, Alberto corrected. He stepped into the room, closing the door. But I know you, Sophia. I've known you since we were kids. You don't have that got away look. You have the someone saved me look. He walked closer, his eyes narrowing. It was Dante, wasn't it? He let you go. He gave us the traitors, Alberto. He gave us the shipment. He gave us what he wanted us to have, Alberto shouted, grabbing my arm. And he gave it to you because he owns you now. You're a Romano asset, sister. And Papa needs to know before he walks into a trap. It's not a trap for us, it's a trap for them, I screamed, struggling against his grip. If Papa hits the social club, the Lucases will turn on us. They're the ones who brokered the peace. They'll see it as a Morty betrayal. Alberto paused. The logic hit him. In the Mafia, politics were as deadly as bullets. If our father broke the peace brokered by the city's largest family, we wouldn't just be fighting the Romanos. We'd be fighting everyone. He doesn't care, Alberto whispered, his grip loosening. He's old, Sophia. He wants to be the king of Chicago before he dies, even if he's king of a graveyard. Help me, I pleaded. Help me stop the massacre. We can take the shipment, we can take the territory, but we can't do it this way. Alberto looked at the door, then back at me. I saw the ghost of the boy who had tried to help me run away 10 years ago. He'll kill me if he finds out. He'll kill us both if this war happens, I countered. Alberto reached into his pocket and pulled out his burner phone. You have 2 minutes. Then I'm taking the phone and I'm telling him I caught you trying to escape. I grabbed the phone, my fingers flying over the keypad. I didn't call Dante directly. I called the safe house number he'd signaled to me earlier. It rang once. Twice, speak, a voice said. It wasn't Dante. It was his father, the Don. This is Sophia Morty, I said, my voice steady despite the terror. Tell Dante, tell him the social club is the target, not the pier, not the boat. They're coming for your father in 20 minutes. There was a long silence on the other end. Why are you telling us this, child? Because your son saved my life, I said, and because I'm tired of seeing blood. I hung up and handed the phone back to Alberto. He tucked it away, his face a mask of grief. Run, he said. Get out through the servants' tunnel. If you stay here, you're dead either way. I didn't wait. I kissed my brother's cheek and ran. The streets were a blur as I stole a car from the outer motor pool, a nondescript sedan used for errands. I drove like a madwoman toward the Romano Social Club, praying I wasn't too late. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, the wipers barely keeping up with the flood. As I approached the west side, the atmosphere changed. The streets were too quiet. No police, no pedestrians. It was the silence before the storm. I pulled over half a block from the club and saw them, three black SUVs with tinted windows idling in the shadows. My father's hit squad. I jumped out of the car, running toward the subs. I had to stop them. If I could just talk to the lead capo, maybe I could delay it. But as I reached the first vehicle, the doors flew open. Sophia, what the hell are you doing here? It was Rico, my father's most loyal soldier. Orders changed, I shouted. Papa says retreat, it's a setup. Rico looked at me, then at the social club. The order came from the boss himself 3 minutes ago, Sophia. We move in at 3:45. That's now, he pushed me aside and signaled the others. I watched in horror as 12 armed men stepped out of the cars, suppressed rifles in their hands. They moved with a chilling efficiency, a phalanx of death heading for the club's entrance. I ran after them, screaming for them to stop, but the world exploded into chaos. From the windows of the social club, a storm of gunfire erupted. The Romanos were ready. My warning had worked, but it had worked too well. It wasn't just a defense, it was an ambush. I saw Rico go down in the first volley. I saw the black SUV shredded by high caliber rounds. I dove behind a parked car, the air filled with the scent of cordite and the screams of dying men. This was the war I had tried to prevent. This was the blood my father had demanded and the blood Dante had tried to spare. Through the smoke and the flashes of gunfire, I saw a figure emerge from the side entrance of the club. He was wearing a tactical vest, a rifle in his hands. It was Dante. He was moving toward the Morty line, his eyes scanning the chaos. Dante, I screamed, but my voice was lost in the roar of a grenade detonating near the lead SUV. I saw him pause, his head turning toward my voice. He began to move toward me, ignoring the bullets whizzing past him. Sophia, get out of here. He was halfway across the street when the second wave arrived. But it wasn't Romano reinforcements. It was a fleet of white sedans, the Lucchese family. They weren't there to join the fight, they were there to end it. Dozens of men in gray suits stepped out, their weapons trained on both sides. A man in his 60s, the Lucchese underboss, stepped into the middle of the street with a megaphone. Cease fire. By order of the commission, this engagement is over. The shooting slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. I stood up slowly, my hands raised. Dante was 10 feet away from me, his rifle lowered but still in his hand. Sophia Mordi, Dante Romano, the Lucchese underboss called out. You are both summoned. Your fathers are already waiting. The sit down took place in a neutral warehouse in the neutral zone, a strip of territory near the airport that no family claimed. The air was cold, the space lit by harsh industrial lamps. In the center of the room sat a long table. On one side, my father, Lorenzo Morti, looking like he aged 10 years in a single night. On the other side, Vincent Romano, Dante's father, nursing a wounded arm. In the center sat the Don of the Lucchese family, the ultimate arbiter of the Chicago underworld. Dante and I were made to stand at opposite ends of the room, guarded by Lucchese soldiers. Tonight, the Lucchese dawn began, his voice like grinding stones. The peace was broken. A Morty princess was captured. A Romano heir was seduced. A massacre was attempted, and a warning was sent that saved a Don's life. He looked at me, then at Dante. The question is, who is responsible for the treachery? My father stood up, his finger pointing at Dante. He kidnapped my daughter. He brainwashed her into betraying her own blood. He used her to feed us false information. Vincent Romano laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Your daughter came to our house to kill us, Lorenzo. My son saved her from a bullet, and she rewarded him by warning us of your coward strike. If anyone is a traitor, it's the girl. I felt the eyes of every man in the room on me. My father's eyes were full of a hate so pure it made the gunfire outside seem like a caress. Is it true, Sophia? The Lucchese Don asked. Did you warn the enemy? I looked at Dante. He was staring at me, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes were screaming for me to lie. He wanted me to save myself. He wanted me to blame him. I didn't warn an enemy, I said, my voice echoing in the vast space. I warned a partner. The Romanos aren't the ones who broke the peace. My father is. He didn't want the shipment. He wanted a monopoly. He was willing to sacrifice me, his sons, and every man in this room to get it. The room erupted. My father lunged across the table, but he was held back by the Lucchese guards. You bitch, you ungrateful whore, I made you. You made a weapon, Papa, I shouted over his rants. But you forgot that weapons can be turned around. The Lucchese Don silenced the room with a sharp rap of his cane. He looked at Dante. And you, Romano heir, what is your part in this? Did you seduce her to destroy her family? Dante stepped forward, ignoring the guards. He walked to the center of the room, his eyes never leaving mine. I didn't seduce her. I fell in love with her. And if that's a crime in the city, then every man here is a hypocrite. The confession hung in the air like a death sentence. In our world, love wasn't a defense, it was a weakness. It was a reason to be eliminated. The Lucchese Don leaned back, his eyes narrowing. A Mordi and a Romano, a Romeo and Juliet in the land of concrete and lead. It's poetic, but it's bad for business. He looked at our fathers. Lorenzo, you have lost the confidence of the commission. You are stripped of your territory. Vincent, you have shown you cannot control your own air. You are fined the value of the waterfront. He then looked back at us. As for the two of you, the commission has reached a decision to ensure the peace, to ensure that neither family rises to challenge the order again. You will be bound. Bound, I whispered. A marriage, the Don said, his voice devoid of emotion. A union of blood. You will live under Luki's supervision. Every dollar you make, every move you make will be monitored. You will be the bridge that ensures these two families never draw blood again. My father screamed in protest, but he was ignored. Dante looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in the darkness. We were being forced together, yes, but it was the only way we could stay alive. But then the Don leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. But there is a catch to prove your loyalty to this new order, to prove that you are not just two children playing at rebel. One of you must provide the commission with the head of the man who started tonight's violence. He looked at me, then at the gun sitting on the table. Sophia, your father tried to start a war. To seal this peace, you must be the one to end his reign permanently. The room went cold. Dante took a step toward me, but a dozen rifles were instantly trained on his chest. My father looked at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror he had never shown before. Do it, Sophia, the Liulchi's Don commanded, or both of you die here and the war continues until there isn't a Morty or a Romano left to bury. I looked at the gun. I looked at my father, the man who had raised me in blood. Then I looked at Dante, the man who had shown me there was another way. I reached for the gun, my hand trembling. This was the moment, the midpoint of my destruction or my rebirth. I picked up the weapon, the weight of it familiar and horrifying. I looked at Dante one last time. He shook his head, his eyes pleading. Sophia, don't, we'll find another way. There is no other way, the Don said. I turned toward my father. He stood there, his chest heaving, his lips curling into a defiant snarl. Do it, then, be the weapon I made you. I leveled the gun at his heart. My finger tightened on the trigger. The silence in the room was absolute, a void waiting to be filled by a gunshot. But as I prepared to fire, the heavy doors of the warehouse exploded inward, not Lucas's, not Morty's. A third force wearing tactical gear with no markings swarmed the room. They didn't target the guards, they targeted the leaders. In the confusion, my father lunged for a hidden weapon. Dante tackled me to the ground as a hail of bullets shredded the table where the Dons sat. Who are they? I screamed over the noise. Feds, Dante yelled back, his voice thick with realization. Your father. He wasn't just talking to the Lucases. He cut a deal with the FBI to wipe us all out. This was his exit strategy. I looked up and saw my father running toward the back exit, flanked by agents. He had sold out the entire Chicago underworld to save his own skin. He hadn't just used me as a pawn, he had used the entire commission. We have to get out of here. Dante grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the loading docks. But as we reached the door, a flashbang detonated, blinding us. When my vision cleared, I was being dragged away by two men in tactical gear. Let her go. Dante's voice was fading as he was pushed into the shadows by a separate group. Target secured, a voice said in my ear. Take her to the safe house. The director wants the Morty girl alive. I realized then that the war hadn't ended, it had just changed shape. And as I was tossed into the back of a van, I saw Dante being hauled into another vehicle, his eyes fixed on mine through the closing doors. The last thing I saw was my father standing by a black SUV, a smirking victor in a field of ruins. The man who had raised me had finally won. He had destroyed everyone, including his own daughter, to stay on top. And now I was a prisoner of the state, and Dante was lost in the chaos. The peace was a lie, the love was a target. And the only thing left was the cold, hard reality of revenge. The metal doors of the van slammed shut, severing the last tether of light between Dante and me. The sound was final, like the lid of a casket. I was shoved onto a cold bench, my hands zip-tied behind my back. the blood-red silk of my dress now a tattered rag that mocked the girl I had been 6 hours ago. The van lurched forward, and as it pulled away from the warehouse of the sit-down, I realized the silence was worse than the gunfire. In the silence, you could finally hear the sound of your own heart breaking. Agent Miller, FBI, the man sitting across from me said, his face illuminated by the green glow of a tactical tablet. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who had spent 20 years staring into the abyss and eventually decided to start charging rent. Don't look so surprised, Sophia. Your father didn't just sell out the Romanos, he sold out everyone. The commission, the Lucases, even his own sons, all for a witness protection deal and a house in Arizona. He sold me too, I whispered, my throat feeling like it was lined with glass. Actually, you were the bargaining chip, Miller replied, tapping the screen. He wanted you in the program with him, a nice, clean slate. He said you were a victim of circumstances, but we saw the footage from the Romano Social Club. We know you warned them that's not a victim, Sophia, that's an accomplice. He leaned forward, his eyes cold. Dante Romano is on his way to a maximum security black site. If you want to see him alive again, you're going to tell us exactly what was on that silver drive he gave you. I leaned my head back against the vibrating wall of the van. My father had burned the world to stay warm, but he had underestimated one thing. I wasn't his pawn anymore. I was Dante's partner. And in our world, when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous thing in the room. The drive had names, Agent Miller, I said, a slow, lethal smile spreading across my face, but not the names you're looking for. Dante didn't give me his secrets. He gave me yours. The safe house was a sterile, high rise apartment overlooking the lake, but to me, it was just another cage. Two agents stood outside the door, and Miller remained inside, pacing like a wolf. He didn't believe me about the drive, not yet, but the seed of doubt was planted. Dante had told me the drive held the names of Morty traders, but as I sat in that van, I remembered the way he had looked at me when he handed it over. Use this to negotiate your way to the top. He hadn't been talking about the Morty hierarchy. He'd been talking about the food chain of the city. Dante knew about the feds. He knew about the leak. And he had given me the only weapon that could cut through federal steel. I need to speak to my father, I said, standing up. My silk dress was stained with oil and blood, but I carried myself with the weight of the Morty name for the last time. If he's the one who made this deal, I want to hear it from him. Or I don't say another word, and you can explain to your director why the biggest bust in Chicago history just turned into a mistrial because your star witness's daughter wouldn't cooperate. Miller grunted, but he made the call. 10 minutes later, the door opened and Lorenzo Morty walked in. He looked different without his suit and his soldiers. He looked small. He looked like an old man who had realized too late that you can't buy loyalty with a silver tongue when you've already cut out everyone's heart. Sophia, he said, reaching out for me. I stepped back, the movement sharp and visceral. Don't, I warned. Did you kill Alberto? Was he part of the liquidation too? My father flinched, his eyes darting to Miller. It had to be done, Sophia. The family was compromised. I was saving us. I was saving you. You were saving your own skin, Papa. You traded Dante's life for a tan and a golf course. I walked toward him until I could see the yellow in the whites of his eyes. But you made a mistake. You told me men are weakest when they think they've conquered a woman. You thought you conquered me because you raised me. You forgot that you raised me to be just like you. I spent the next hour playing the most delicate game of my life. I told Miller that the drive, which was currently being held in a secure locker at the FBI field office, contained evidence of a massive bribery ring involving the assistant district attorney. It was a lie, but it was a lie built on enough truth to make him move. I needed that drive. I needed to get back into the field, and I needed to find where they were holding Dante. If I get you that drive and you testify against the Romano estate, I can promise you Dante Romano will be processed as a low level informant, Miller said, his greed for the big win finally overriding his caution. He'll get 5 years in a minimum security facility. You'll be free. I want it in writing, I said. While they prepared the paperwork, I was allowed a moment of privacy to clean up in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. The Morty ice was there, but beneath it was something burned and forged. I reached into the hidden lining of my garter. The agents had taken my blade, but they hadn't checked the reinforced silk of the pouch itself. I pulled out a small, flat electronic key. Dante had slipped it into my hand during our last kiss in the safe house, a movement so subtle I hadn't even realized it until I was in the van. It wasn't a key to a door. It was a tracker. The light on the key flickered a faint, steady blue. Dante was moving. They weren't taking him to a black site, they were moving him to the docks. My heart hammered. The FBI didn't move high priority targets to the docks at 4 a.m. unless they were handing them over to someone else. My father hadn't just made a deal with the feds. He had made a side deal with the Romanos' rivals to finish the job. He was going to let the feds have the organization, but he was going to give Dante's head to the Lucases to ensure he was never hunted in his new life. Miller, I screamed, bursting out of the bathroom. They're not taking him to jail. Look at the transport logs. Who authorized the route through the industrial district? Miller frowned, checking his tablet. That's a standard alternate route. He trailed off, his face pale. Wait, that's not our team. The transport unit 7 Beta. They didn't check in at the bypass. The industrial district of Chicago at 4:30 a.m. is a landscape of rust and ghosts. We moved in a 3-car convoy, sirens silent, racing toward a cluster of abandoned silos near the river. My father was in the car with us, his hands shaking. He knew he'd been caught in a double cross. He'd tried to play too many sides, and now the boards were all crashing down. If anything happens to him, Papa, I said, my voice a cold promise, the FBI won't have to worry about a trial. I'll end this myself. We saw the transport van parked between 2 silos, its back doors open. A group of men in gray suits, Lukey's soldiers, were standing around a kneeling figure, Dante. Even from a distance, I could see the defiance in the way he held his head. He was beaten, his white shirt stained crimson, but he wasn't broken. Enzo was there. Somehow, the snake had survived the library and the shootout. He held a silenced pistol to the back of Dante's head. Drop the weapons, Miller shouted as we spilled out of the cars. FBI, nobody moves. Enzo didn't flinch. He looked at us, then at my father. Lorenzo, he called out, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel. The Lucases don't like witnesses. You should have stayed in the van. Everything happened in a blur of motion. Enzo pulled the trigger, but Dante rolled at the last second, the bullet grazing his shoulder. Gunfire erupted from the silos, Lucas snipers. Miller was hit in the first volley, slumped against the car door. My father dived for cover, but I ran. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a plan. I just had the desperate, screaming need to be near the only man who had ever truly seen me. I reached Dante as he lunged for Enzo's legs. I grabbed the fallen pistol from a dead agent, and without a moment's hesitation, I fired at the men closing in. The recoil shook my bones, but I didn't stop. I was a weapon wrapped in silk, just like my father wanted. But I was firing for my own cause now. We were pinned behind a rusted shipping container, the air thick with the smell of salt water and gunpowder. Dante leaned against the metal, gasping for air, his hand clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked at me, a ghost of a smile on his bloodied lips. You came back, he whispered. You left me your tracker, I said, my voice trembling as I checked the clip of the gun. You knew this was going to happen. I knew your father, Dante said, his voice a raspy growl. He's a man of many exits. I just had to make sure you were on the right one. He reached out, his bloody fingers tangling in mine. Sophia, listen to me. There's a boat at the end of the pier, not the Siren, a small cutter called the Second Chance. It's got enough fuel to get you to Michigan. From there, you go to the address in the lining of your boot. Me, no, Dante. We're going together. I'm a Romano heir. I'm the trophy, he said, the sound of boots on gravel getting closer. As long as I'm with you, they'll never stop hunting. But if I stay, if I give them what they want, they'll lose interest in a ghost like you. No, I hissed, grabbing his lapels. I didn't betray my family and risk my life to hear a martyr's speech. You told me you fell in love with me. You told me you wanted more than a pawn. Prove it, stand up and fight for the queen. Dante stared at me, the stormy gray of his eyes catching the first faint light of dawn. The weight of our names, the blood of our fathers, the 100-Year War, it all seemed to evaporate in the heat of that gaze. He nodded, a slow, grim determination settling over his features. One way or another, he said, this ends tonight. We moved as one, a coordinated dance of desperation. I covered the left flank, Dante took the right. We weren't Morty and Romano anymore. We were a third family, born of fire and betrayal. We fought our way toward the pier, the Lukey's soldiers caught between the FBI reinforcements arriving from the north and our own lethal path of escape. I saw Enzo one last time. He was trying to get to a getaway car. I didn't think, I didn't breathe. I just leveled the pistol and fired. He fell into the dark water of the Chicago River without a sound. One debt paid. The end happened at the very edge of the city where the concrete meets the lake. My father was there, standing by the pier, clutching a briefcase. He looked at us, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. He had his own boat waiting, his own path to a coward's peace. Sophia, stop, he yelled as we approached. They'll kill you. If you stay with him, there is no protection. The feds, the families, they'll never let a Romano and a Morty walk away together. It's a violation of everything we are. It's a violation of everything you are, Papa, I said, standing 10 feet from him. Dante was beside me, his gun trained on the shadows behind my father. You spent your life building walls of blood to keep everyone out. We're stepping over them. You have the drive, my father pleaded, stepping closer. Give it to me. I can negotiate. I can get you both out. I still have friends in DC. You have no friends, Lorenzo. A voice boomed from the darkness. Vincent Romano stepped out from behind a stack of crates, followed by his remaining soldiers. He looked like a king who had lost his crown but kept his sword. He looked at his son, then at me, then at my father. The commission is dead, Vincent said, his voice heavy with finality. The Lucases have fled. The feds are swarming the city. Tonight, the old world burned down. He turned to Dante. My son, my heir, you chose a Morty. I chose a woman, father, Dante replied, his voice steady. The name is just a scar. Vincent looked at me for a long time. I didn't lower my weapon. I stood my ground, the daughter of his enemy, the woman who had warned him of his own death. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. Some scars never heal, he whispered, but some are worth carrying. He looked at my father, his eyes filling with a cold, ancient hatred. Lorenzo Morty, you broke the omerta. You sold our sons to the government. For that, there is only one sentence. Wait, I shouted, stepping forward. Everyone turned to me. No more blood, I said, my voice echoing over the crashing waves. If you kill him, the feds will hunt you for the rest of your life. They need a body for the trial. Give them him, give them the man who started the fire. let him live in a cage, watching the world he built disappear. That's a worse death for a man like him. Dante looked at me, then at his father. Vincent Romano nodded slowly. The girl has the ice, he murmured. Fine, he stays for the feds. The sunrise was a bruised purple and orange over Lake Michigan as the small cutter pulled away from the pier. The sounds of sirens were a distant hum now, a world away from the salt spray and the rocking of the boat. My father sat on the pier, cuffs around his wrists, surrounded by a dozen agents who had finally caught their big fish. He looked smaller than ever, a speck of gray against the rising sun. I sat on the deck of the Second Chance, wrapped in a thick wool blanket Dante had found in the cabin. He sat beside me, his shoulder bandaged, his hand finally resting in mine. We were stripped of our names, our titles, and our futures. We were ghosts drifting toward a horizon we couldn't see. What happens now? I asked, leaning my head against his. We disappear, Dante said, his voice a low, soothing vibration. We go to a place where Morty and Romano are just words in a history book. We change our faces, we change our lives. We start at zero. Is it possible? I asked, looking at the city skyline receding in the distance. Can we really leave the shadows? Dante turned to me, his gray eyes soft with a tenderness that still caught me off guard. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, moving over the place where my father's ring had once cut me. The shadows will always be there, Sophia. We were born in them, but they don't have to be our home. We carry the dark so we can appreciate the light. He lined in, and this time the kiss didn't taste like bourbon and war. It tasted like rain and salt and the terrifying, beautiful possibility of a tomorrow. It was the terminal point of the seduction I was sent to perform and the starting line of a life I had never dared to dream of. 2 years later, the smell of sea salt and lemon trees always reminds me of my life now. It's a scent that lingers in the white linen curtains of our cottage, a permanent ghost of the peace we fought to find. In this small coastal village in Portugal, loyalty is a choice we make every morning over coffee and the sound of the Atlantic. I looked at the newspaper on the wooden table, a small clipping from the international section. Lorenzo Mordi dies in federal prison at 72. I felt a flicker of something, not grief, not joy, just a quiet, hollow recognition of a finished chapter. Dante came in from the garden, his skin tanned by the sun, his eyes clearer than they had ever been in Chicago. He didn't carry a gun anymore, though his hand still instinctively checked his hip when a stranger knocked. He walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. You're thinking about him, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking about the girl in the red dress, I replied, leaning back into him. The one who went into a library thinking she could play the devil. Dante chuckled, the sound rich and warm. She was a good actress, but she was a terrible spy. She forgot that the devil always knows his own. He turned me around in his arms, his gaze lingering on my face with the same intensity he'd shown at the gala. Do you ever regret it? He asked softly. Leaving the diamonds and the power for this? I looked around our small home, the mismatched chairs, the cracked tiles, the life built on ruins and secrets. I looked at the man who had traded a kingdom for my heart. Power is just a cage with better lighting, Dante. I'd rather be free in the dark with you. The sun began to set over the ocean, casting a long, amber glow through the room. We stood there, two survivors of a war the world had forgotten, watching the light fade. I still look over my shoulder sometimes. I still wake up at 3 a.m. when the wind catches the door just right. The mafia never truly lets go of your soul, it just loosens its grip. But as I looked at Dante, I realized that the price we paid, the blood, the betrayal, the loss of everything we knew was worth the moment we were standing in. They say in our world, you die the moment you feel something. I died that night at the gala. I died when I looked into Dante Romano's eyes and saw my own reflection. But as his lips met mine in the quiet of the evening, I knew the truth. I didn't die, I just finally started living. The shadows moved like promises across the floor, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what they were hiding. Because whatever came next, whatever ghost decided to crawl out of the Chicago concrete to hunt us down, they would find us ready. We weren't a weapon and a pawn anymore. We were a storm, and storms don't look back. The city lights of Chicago are thousands of miles away, but I can still hear the echo of Dante's voice in that smoke filled ballroom. You think I don't know who sent you? I smiled to myself, closing the newspaper and folding it into a small, tight square. I'll burn it later along with the memories, because the best part of being a ghost is that you get to choose who haunts you. And I choose the man standing in front of me, always. The dark doesn't hide secrets here. It just gives them a place to rest, and finally, so do I.